a great panel we've got today. Not counting myself amongst that, obviously, but I'd like to thank Matthew from SARN and Guy and Ruth as well from Green Core for joining us today. The good news is that they are going to do most of the speaking. We thought it was really important when we look at the corporate narrative that we gave you some really practical live examples that look at the world in two quite different ways, two different problems, two different solutions. Really interesting, I think, to hear those stories firsthand. In order to get us going, though, I think we're going to spend a little bit of time on what we believe the corporate narrative is, as to why you actually need one, what it's going to do for your business, how those things come together. And for that, I would like to introduce Susanna. Susanna is Client Services Director in our team and has worked with the Green Core team as well to actually deliver their projects. So, Susanna, if you'd like to take over.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Vic. Okay, so I think let's just begin by kind of asking the question, what's driving this need for a clear corporate narrative? And to do that, I think, first of all, we need to just consider for a moment what's going on in the world. I think it's probably fair to say that awareness and possibly fear of unsustainable human civilization on Earth is at an all-time high. Now, I know that sounds quite highfalutin, and you might be asking the question, what's that got to do with corporate communication? But it's important, as it's this that's driving the trend towards an increasing social and environmental conscience. And that trend is really only going in one direction. And what it means is that customers and consumers and employees are demanding far more of governments and of companies. And of course, they are in kind responding to that demand and of course the need for change in how they think, how they act, and importantly, how they communicate what it is that they're doing. And by doing so, they're attracting investors who are hungry for long-term sustainable growth. That's also driven new disclosure requirements. So you can see here on the screen in the black kind of half here, some of those new requirements. For some businesses, it's mandatory. For others, it's guidance. But either way, businesses increasingly have to report and communicate on these matters. Now, let's just be crystal clear about something. You can't report it if you're not doing it. And in this age of uber transparency, if you are simply paying lip service to this, or purpose washing, greenwashing, some of these terms that we hear bandied around now, it's fair to say that you'll probably soon be found out. So authenticity is essential. And what that means is that your corporate narrative really must be developed from the inside out. So let's just take a look at the next slide and see what that means in practice. It means living the purpose. It means driving the culture, building social and environmental targets into your strategy, and having really positive engagements with all of your stakeholders. So what you can see on screen here now is the makeup of a corporate narrative. And these are each of the component parts that cover a business's sort of non-financial strategic elements. And each of these elements needs to be clearly defined and truly aligned, because it's their interdependence that joins all the pieces together to tell that sort of cohesive story, with all roads leading back to a meaningful purpose. That purpose should inspire your workforce and resonate with all of your stakeholders. And I suspect that many of you looking at this now probably already have a lot of this in place, and many businesses do. So in the first instance, it's key to identify which of these aspects you already have nailed down, which bits maybe need a little bit of tweaking or refining, and where there's possibly a need for greater definition or development. And once in place, the benefits of having this sort of cohesive and truly authentic corporate narrative are really far-reaching. So your corporate narrative should make it crystal clear to all your stakeholders what you're really working for, and importantly, how you'll go about getting there. It's an important part of your equity story to attract investment. And embedded into your workforce, it can really inspire people around a shared ambition, and give you that unique cultural flavour that makes your business really special and attracts the right talent. It can guide business decisions at the most strategic, but also the most tactical level. And it should provide a yardstick to measure your environmental and social impact and the difference you make as an organisation year on year. And as you work together as an organisation, united in your commitment to a common purpose, you will drive performance, you will deliver against your strategic objectives, and work together towards achieving your vision. And I think it's fair to say that at this time, this is only going to become more important as we emerge into a post-COVID era, where businesses will be increasingly expected to be accountable and to demonstrate how they act responsibly. And I imagine that many businesses will come out of this period a different shape. So it's a really good time to look at each of these different aspects of your story. But there are other catalysts to considering your narrative. And I'll hand over to Keith to talk a little bit more about that.
In my Chris Whitty moment, next slide, please. I think we've all been given a gift there, haven't we, when we're doing these kind of events now? We can always just go to the Chris Whitty moment. Hey, look, we tend to meet clients and talk to businesses at a point of change. So what we started to think about in terms of today are what are the things that make you begin to think, what are the triggers around a business that go, yeah, we need to look at this corporate narrative from a different sense. And I think traditionally, particularly as somebody who's head of brand, I've found that those triggers has always been around about the brand piece. But as Suzanne has always said, it's much more than that. It's about your people and culture. It's about your sustainability promise. It's about your ESG. You may be legislatively driven or governance driven. And I think your target audiences are really, really important as well. They're much wider than customers. So yeah, we've got to think about investors. We've got to think about employees. We've got to think about the supply chain. And yes, obviously we do. We need to think about customers. And I've just picked out 6 pieces of work, all of which are our Emperor clients, and thought about how we'd really began to work with those organizations and think about what had driven them to look at their corporate narrative and review their business and how this messaging hangs together. Knights we worked with just before they decided to float. And for any of you in the legal sector will know that there's been very few law firms or professional services firms that have actually listed. And that's a narrative that's had to evolve over time, because first of all, it was about actually preparing a narrative to list. After that, it was about acquisition and looking at how they could use that narrative to actually attract other businesses into their network. If you have a look in the news today, they've picked up another one in Exeter that's joined the Knights network. And then again, we're now looking at things like people attraction, talent attraction, retention and culture that are starting to craft that narrative. I'm going to come back to Channel 4 finally, because I think they've got a really interesting piece. Greencore, you're going to hear from Guy, you're going to hear from Ruth today. They're going to tell the story in their own words. But that was very much for me about changing their operational strategy and their business strategy that became very purpose driven. And for Sarn, a similar sort of story. Again, Matthew will tell that story in his own words. But after their IPO and after actually acquiring quite a lot of businesses around the world and becoming a very different proposition, we then got to look at how we position Sarn to go to the next phase of their business as a global force. I've picked the BBC as well, because if you actually think about what drives their strategy, their narrative, about what the very essence of the BBC is here to do, that one in particular is very governance led. And XPS is another client that we know and love well, but what drove their piece was merger. So when Xafinity merged with Punter Southall to form the biggest UK pensions group, pure play pensions group in the country, it was all about, well, what does this really mean? And how do we bring these two organizations together? How do we nurture our talent? How do people understand what this means to the pensions market? And how do we have a voice that's got some relevance? I'm going to come back to Channel 4 though, because it's a unique and complex beast, and they have a real sense of a purpose-led corporate narrative, really, and it's both defined in legislation and governance, but also purpose. So if you have a look at Channel 4 and how they describe themselves, they have a lovely piece that says, "Why are we here?" And it opens with the line, refined in legislation since 1982. So, we started off from a place of, we're not here because we're crafting this piece out. It's like, no, it's defined for us as to why we're here. But it requires Channel 4 to be innovative, to inspire change, to nurture talent, and to offer a platform for alternative views, which has crafted a purpose. We champion unheard voices. We innovate and take bold, creative risks. We inspire change in the way that we lead our lives, and we stand up for diversity throughout the UK. And I think these things are really powerful. And when you actually start to think about how businesses are not just thinking about their brand, which is the space I come from, or their engagement, which is, a place that brand very naturally leads into with people promises. When you think about that from a sustainability perspective, from a diversity perspective, how businesses inspire change, how they're different and relevant and authentic, there's a really powerful piece that can bring your business together and drive your strategy. That's quite a promise. And I feel like, I'm about to introduce Guy, and he's about to tell his story. It's a brilliant story. So please listen. There'll be questions at the end. We're going to go from Guy and Ruth straight into Matthew, but we will have some questions for all of our speakers and Susanna and myself when you're ready. So Guy, over to you.
Great, thanks, Keith. So just brief introduction for myself, and I'll introduce Ruth as well. So I head up HR for Greencore. We're a FTSE 250 listed business, and I've got Ruth, who's in my team. She's the head of comms and engagement for us across the group as well. I'm going to run you through about 10 slides or so, just to give you the story from a Greencore perspective. And I've enlisted Ruth to pick up in terms of questions at the end, certainly the harder ones that I'm not going to field at least. So just to move us into a little bit of background and context on Greencore, many of you may not necessarily be familiar with us as an organisation. As I said earlier, we're a FTSE 250 business. We're a food manufacturing business. You can see on here all sorts of statistics around the group and what we do. It's at least probably fair to say that about 50% of the UK population will have eaten one of our products in the last month. And that might be a surprise to you, because most of the products, at least, are own label products produced on behalf of retailers. And so we're a reasonable scale in terms of about 12,500 colleagues across the group and about 35 sites. And we make a huge number of deliveries as well, direct to store. So we're serving sort of sandwiches and food to go products across retailers, petrol stations, those sorts of things. And we've been in this guise at least since 1991. We're headquartered in Dublin, but all of our operations now are UK based, which I'll come back to actually in a moment or two. So just gives you a bit of a flavour of who we are, and you can see in the middle the purpose statement, which is making every day taste better. And again, I'll bring that to life for you as we go through the next few slides. So the journey that we've been on started actually back in 2014 when we created what we called the Greencore Way and developed an international strategy, which we rolled out to the group. It's incredibly successful, very, very well adopted across the UK operating business, and at that stage at least the US operating business as well. Replicated in both, made our ambitions pretty clear, dealt with all the sort of stakeholder focus areas and ambitions that we had, and was a significant sort of progressive step for the organisation at that stage. Worked well for us up until 2018, actually, when we divested our whole US operation in its entirety and just became a UK operating business at that point in time. And quite quickly, what emerged from that is that a lot of the focus and strategic ambitions had been international up to that point in 2018. And of course, changing the emphasis of the business going forwards was significant for all stakeholders, actually, but not least of all our own people. And so to start from the sort of beginning, as it were, in the sort of late period of 2018, 2019, we started to work with Susanna and the team at Emperor to define what the future might look like for us. And we used the pyramid that Susanna described earlier on to sort of detail out and structure our thinking. And in terms of culture, which was an important aspect for me being an HR leader, we did a diagnostic with another organisation actually into some considerable detail around the culture of the organisation, the structure, and what that looked like in the summer of 2019. What came out of the back of that was a Capital Markets Day, which we did in the autumn, September of 2019, where we made the next 5 years of our corporate strategy really clear to all stakeholders. It was a very successful day. We didn't go into the detail at that point, at least, on what we were thinking about with regard to purpose, culture, and how we were thinking about the Green Core way, but we did very clearly define the strategy, as we said, the next 5-year chapter. As we came out of that period in September, we went into the autumn, late autumn and winter period of 2019 into the early part of 20. We actually did a reasonably significant piece of organisational design as well, which is not called out on this chart. And we changed the leadership structure reasonably significantly and simplified it and made it a lot flatter in terms of the structure. Out of the back of that, we then started a process of engagement around purpose as we went into the early part of the year and started to define, talking to those people, the structure, the hierarchy, around what the Green Core way meant to them, what purpose, the mission, the brand, the business, and all of the different component parts that go into what makes Green Core culture. It was an in-depth piece of work, and Susanna started that with our CEO and CFO, and then brought in the wider executive team, including myself, in terms of sort of the due diligence that went into that. Also, all of the work that we've done on the cultural diagnostic and lots of the information that we have in the organisation fed into that in terms of sort of due diligence and information, so that we could all get a real collective feel for how the business was looking. And then we started to define and build the purpose statement. We then built our brand ambassadors as we went into the early part of the summer, clearly dealing with COVID as well at that point in time. And then we did our internal purpose launch and rebrand internally, at least, on the 21st of October. And actually just today, we've launched our brand externally with our year-end accounts and reports from last year. So very topical, literally, that's going on as we speak now. So just in terms of a little bit more detail around the why now. So we had a lot of questions from the organisation, as you probably would well imagine with regard to COVID and things, as to why would now be the right time for us to be thinking about that. And actually, as we've gone through the COVID process, we've been very purposeful about that and how we've led that. Hashtag food heroes being a key aspect of that, but we've also had 3 key sort of strap lines around keeping our people safe, keeping Britain fed and protecting our organisation, being the 3 sort of strap lines that have seen us through the 8 or 9 months at least of COVID this year. And we realised the true value of purpose at that point, and therefore we feel that sort of acknowledging that now, energising the organisation as we hope to move into the early part of 21 and see a vaccine and hopefully the move out of this, that will energise the organisation and come out of the other side of the challenges that we've had as an organisation far stronger. And driving the sort of the ambition and the sort of cultural sort of performance of the organisation, very clearly focused around the UK, what we do, how we do it, and how we want to be perceived by all of our kind of stakeholders. The other aspect that was on our mind when we were thinking about that was just one of control, and actually people being in control at the moment and having something that's sort of effectively within their control is very important. in the respect that so many things aren't in any of our control at the moment, and that being, you know, frustrating, bordering on sort of challenging from a mental health perspective, and that was certainly on our mind. Creating a corporate narrative and a purpose enabled us to sort of focus people in a little bit in that regard. You can see here how we were thinking about the buy-in. That was probably the key aspect of the discussions that we had with Susanna and the team, actually, to start with, around how it would be accepted and the why now point. If we can get the right level of buy-in, we'll make it work, even with all the distractions out there. I'm just going to touch on 3 aspects here. One is the CEO, and Patrick Coveney, who's our CEO, is an incredibly engaging character, feels very, very strongly about purpose. As I said, started this journey with Susanna, has led from the front very eloquently. And again, I've just come off the results call with him, where he was announcing to all our investors and things the work that we've been doing on purpose and sustainability in recent times. Very clear measure of success in terms of landing it in the organisation, having it absolutely, truly led from the top. The second aspect that I concentrate on really is the senior leaders and what we call the brand advocates for the process. And actually, I'll share with you all on this call, we affectionately refer to them as the cranks. So that, I don't think any of them will mind me sharing that with you, but that was the group of people, the loud voices, the strong characters, the challengers, the critics, generally for whenever we do any kind of initiative in the organisation, and I'm sure you all have those similar people. We engaged those early on, those guys, and we listened to them and we took their feedback and we adjusted. Importantly, we made adjustments from their feedback so they could see that we'd listened and engaged with them. And that's been incredibly powerful, actually. And then finally, the point I'd come to is point 6 on here, which is that we did launch this internally quite some time before we've launched it externally. And actually, we did quite a long teaser campaign for that, which I'll come back to in a few moments. And really spent time talking to our people internally, our board, our internal colleague population, our suppliers, our customers. And we spent real quality time engaging with them in quite an intimate way around it. And again, that's really got us off to a strong start, at least with the internal progression. The external, as I say, is launching today, so we'll see a bit more about that. So just a bit about how we got to the sort of corporate narrative and how we got to our purpose statement. Actually, Susanna worked with the team really hard to develop quite a detailed narrative on the organisation, which was clearly far more extensive than what you can see here, at least on the page. And from that, we started to develop a whole series of what we felt were good quality, meaningful purpose statements that resonated with us from that narrative. And then what we did, we had a whole page of those, I think probably 30 or 40 or so, Susanna, you'll remember well, the agony that we went through on trying to define how we got to them. But what really stood out through those different statements that we identified was actually the words that you can see here on the page. And if you can sort of work through this with me a little bit, you can see that each word is very meaningful to us in the respect of making resonates with us around our manufacturing credentials, clearly. And the fact that in the sustainability report, if you were to read that today, you'd see that a key aspect of that is deemed as making with care. It's an important thing for us. We lead on food safety and food technology, and we want that to be encapsulated in everything that we do, which is clearly why it features here. The everyday nature, we're a food manufacturer, we're an own label food manufacturer, and we're producing chilled food, which is clearly produced on a daily basis and put into the shops the following day for sale. And we really thought that bringing that to life was absolutely critical for us. It also has an element of sort of fresh and energy about it, which I think really resonates with me particularly, and how we bring that to life. You can see there the statistic that I referred to earlier on about the people eating our products. Then taste, and taste is a critical one for us, and really clearly relates to the products that we produce and the continuous innovation that we do. We have about 17,000 different products as it stands, 1,700 different products as it stands today, and we innovate all of the time on products and change and develop those as tastes change and bring them to life for our customer group. And clearly, it's a powerful statement in that respect. And then finally, better, which was a word, I'll be honest with you, I struggled with, and Susanna would share this with you if you were talking to her to start with. But this, where I got to in the end, and satisfied myself at least, is this sort of aspiration for better all the time, the continuous improvement, which is key to our group and how we think about that, and is an absolutely key aspect of us striving to come out of the other side of COVID, which is what I mentioned earlier. So I touched on the Green Core Way, which was established in 2014. There's a very, very strong resonance of that through the group. People feel very, very wedded to it. So we very carefully evolved that model rather than sort of writing it off effectively and starting with a blank piece of paper. We very carefully evolved it. You can see here on the left-hand side of the page the 4 differentiators that we define in the business. This is how we define ourselves: sustainability, excellence, great food, and people at the core, of course. And then if you were to sort of slice through the avocado, as we affectionately refer to it as, you'll see then on the right-hand side of the page the different elements that go into each aspect of those differentiators. It just gives you a little bit more of the context of what's behind them. I think the other point that I would just call out here, which is important, is that actually we've brought together an awful lot of the different component parts that we had in Green Core when we've redefined this and evolved it. And so we've developed the behaviours that we use in the organisations. We don't have values in Green Core, but we have behaviours. We've developed those, and they're now very clearly linked into this model and people at the core. We've developed all of our people-related tools to support the statement. And actually, probably what's most important around this, at least, is that we've developed 6 commitments which go alongside the Green Core Way and the purpose statement. And you know, they've been incredibly powerful. They're focused around the different differentiators here. And just to touch on a couple of the people ones, we are going to award shares to all of our colleagues going forwards, so that each employee within Green Core will be a share owner. As part of the commitment to the purpose statement and sustainability, we want each individual to buy into that going forwards, which is fairly unusual, at least for a listed business to do. And of course, sustainability features as another one of those 6 components in the respect of us having a sustainable skillet. And a skillet's the packet that your sandwich goes in, basically, for those of you that aren't aware. Making sure that we've got something that's completely sustainable in the market for 21 around that. And so bringing the purpose and the Green Core Way to life in a meaningful way with really tangible, evergreen commitments, actually, but with short-term targets that people can, people can get behind, really sort of lands it and brings it to life in the organisation very effectively for us. So just a moment or two on brand. So you can see on the left-hand side the old Green Core brand. We had lots of different brands in the organisation, if I'm honest, lots of the different functions and departments developing their own brands, all getting a little bit complicated and a little bit messy, if I'm honest. We have developed what we describe, or Susanna would help us get to the point of thinking was an inside-out brand. And so you can see in the middle the internal brand of Green Core, and then to the right-hand side the external brand, all part of the work that's gone in, and again, being launched externally today, and brings it all together for us. Now, just to spend a moment or two here on how we brought the sort of the branding, the purpose statement, and the Green Core Way to life for our colleagues and stakeholders. You can see up here in the top left-hand corner the materials that we put together as part of the teaser campaign. We launched that in August in preparation for the October launch. And that went out to all individuals, and you can see how we've pulled through the sort of typology and the style, but also we've adapted and used the purpose statement in different ways and supported bringing that to life in different ways for our people. You can see the picture of the colleagues sitting socially distanced, I might add, watching Patrick Coveney, our CEO, launch it in October. He did a live webcast and also recording to the organisation. And then you can see all the different sort of posters and internal communications and materials and things that we use to bring this to life for colleagues right across the patch, including putting on screensavers so there's nowhere to hide really in that regard. And also the awards programs and things that we use, making sure that that's all in the same theme. So bringing everything together is, is helpful for us in terms of making sure that it's sort of a feature of everyday life and not just wall art in that regard. So a few of the results, and it's probably important to say around the results at least, that this is just the internal results. So this is the feedback that we've had from the internal launch in October, as I said. I'll come to external matters in a moment or two. And you can see some of the feedback that we've had from colleagues, and predominantly focusing around the fact that our CEO owned it and launched it and is very eloquent about it. And it's something that I'm at least very proud of, the fact that he's really taken it seriously and brought it to life for our colleagues and investors and stakeholders more broadly. I think one of the other things I'd call out is the fact that the way that we've produced it and developed it, and Woody and Susanna and the team have helped us pull the materials together, which allows colleagues, manufacturing sites, different functions, departments, areas of the business to adopt it and adapt it in their own way. And that, I think, is really powerful. It is we're able to play around with it, as you see in some examples just a moment or two ago. And people have been really energized by that and feeling that they can, use it in the way that's appropriate to them and adapt it. Has really helped us in terms of the sort of resonating it, at least. And of course, giving us the energy to come out of COVID-19 and drive forwards is key for us. It's early days. It was only launched at the end of October, but great feedback so far. And then just a moment or two on the external launch. As I say, we've launched a new website today. We've launched our annual report and our sustainability report today. They've all gone live on the website so far. I say touching wood without a hitch. You'll see the livery of our vehicles. We have a huge fleet of vehicles across the group, and clearly, and it might be a question on many of your minds around cost. With the challenges that we've had this year, we've had to actually phase the sort of wrapping and updating of the livery on the vehicles and the signage around the sites and the facilities over a 36-month period, actually, just because of cost and sort of challenges around capital and things that we've got as a result of COVID and volume reductions and things. But we've got it all ready to go. We've been doing an audit across all the sites and all the vehicles, and we're moving through bringing that to life, as you can see here in some of the examples. And then finally, I think we're going to skip over questions, but myself and Ruth will be available. I'll hand back to you, Keith, but myself and Ruth are available. I'm very happy to take any questions on any of the aspects that I've talked through, or indeed the more sort of peripheral things on people's minds towards the end.
Thanks, Guy. Really powerful stuff, really well thought through and considered, and you can see how that whole style of corporate narrative starts to come together, touching on all the points that Susanna and I had mentioned a little bit earlier. Completely different spin on the same thing now. So coming to a very different marketplace, to a very different workforce, a very different kind of business. And ultimately, we've ended up with a very different kind of brand as well, haven't we, Matthew? So I'd like to introduce you to Matthew Morell at Sarn. We have actually worked together on this project over lockdown. So that's been a pretty interesting experience in itself. I think we've met each other in person once. So it's that this new style of working has been put to practice. So Matthew, if you could tell your story for Sarn, that would be very much appreciated.
Sure, thanks, Keith. Hi there, everybody. As Keith said, I'm Matthew Morell, Director of Marketing and Corporate Communications at Sarn. Like Greencore, we're a FTSE 250 business. We now are across 20 locations and touching nearly 2,000 people across those locations. But before I go any further, I think it's always good to give you a bit of background as to the story and setting the scene. Next slide, please. So back in 2015, we were only 270 people in a regional type business across 7 locations. And in our industry, you're either privately owned, manager owned, private equity backed, as in someone owns 51% of you, or you're listed, but no one was listed at the time, because that's very difficult to do, and no one really does it. Previous to Keith's comments before about professional services like businesses listing. So at the time, I just joined, and they were considering listing. So we then listed on April the 1st. It wasn't a joke, and we went through. It went through a very long, drawn-out, complicated process, but successfully listed, and then went through effectively a period of 3 years of acquiring businesses. We acquired 13 businesses globally, to be where we are now. And at that time, after that period of time, the CEO at the time, Dean Godwin, decided to retire because he'd been with the business for 12 years. And then our current CEO, Martin Schneier, who was the chief commercial officer at the time, became CEO in Q3 2019. So I've been working with Martin since I arrived at Sarn. I've been here for 6 years, and Martin's a very passionate chap. And he said, well, let's just, unlike Greencore, I suppose, let's rip the rule book up and change the rules. I'd inherited the brand that I then kind of was guardian for, and had always aspired to help the business and take the business through a global rebrand. But doing that in 20 locations is quite challenging, especially when some of those locations don't speak English, and you need to align to the cultural nuances around each of those locations. Mainly, for example, in Japan, Shanghai, Malta, South Africa, New York, Cayman, to name a few. So really, we Martin said, let's reposition the business so we can truly realize all we can be, and that really was in the phase of global rebrand, aligning the corporate culture. What was our core value proposition, and what were the core messages that we wanted to really communicate into the market as a global business, whether you're at a local office level or in a global campaign. And what we do, I think my colleagues would agree, is we provide kind of compliance and governance services broadly in a corporate area. We're a fund administrator, and so when our clients come to us, they come to us because we know all the answers about regulation or legislation, and we can help them with their accounting reporting requirements globally. So we have to create a personality with that, because let's face it, some of that's quite dull, and making it sexy is or attractive is can be quite difficult. Next slide, please. So that was the challenge, and obviously with all those things you need to get a business buy-in. Our business is made up of effectively people from the legacy business, and who've built themselves up are in the executive committee, and those people who are in a product focused role. We have, or industry role. So we have globally 7 industries or products that we look after. We all sit in the alternative space. So for example, real assets is one, private equity is one, private debt, capital markets, corporate. These are all industry sectors which we are experts in. And then overlapped all of that, you have 20 country heads, and then you have functional heads, global functional heads, of which obviously I am one, and then you have staff at all different levels, from your administrator all the way through to executive directors. And then you have the board, and our clients. Many of our clients are like us. They're FTSE 100, 200, 250, Nikkei, NASDAQ, Dow clients, or listed businesses, multiple countries, complicated structures that we help them through. And then we also need to communicate to the people that actually refer us to work, the fund lawyers, the intermediaries, and all those kind of people. And so really it's a case of that's who we needed to talk to and get buy-in from effectively. But really it's the executive committee who thought that we just recently employed a brand manager at the time, and they thought that between myself and Colin, we could actually do the job ourselves. because Colin has a nice new Mac, and that's what they thought. But obviously, with getting buy-in, you then need to demonstrate that we can do it, but it would take a long time. And really, if they want speed to market in lockdown, which is when we started the conversation back in February this year, it actually was perfect timing, because usually we're the marketing team. My marketing team globally looks after circa 250 events globally, which is a lot a month, and we look after logistics and all that kind of stuff. So actually, with COVID coming, it was actually a positive thing that meant that we could actually focus efforts on convincing the Exco to undertake this project, and then we had to go through selecting the right partner, because choosing the right partner was fundamentally important. We needed to then make sure that we knew what we were talking about, and we called it Project Vulcan, not because we're Trekkies and we like Star Trek. I'm not going to go into it, but it's something to do with Vulcan is the guardian of the sun, and we aim to launch in September, which was our half-year results at the time. And September, something to do with the sun. So that's why we called it Project Vulcan. So this is the process we went through and a timeline. Obviously, April, after we had initially kind of won favour internally and got buy-in from certainly the main Exco members and heads of function and country heads and global heads of product, we got very excited, and we then went into 8 agencies, ranging from small ones, local ones, all the way through to global agencies. Emperor was one of those. We wanted to make sure that the agency we chose had the right level of experience and expertise at both kind of a regional and global level, and also help brands to evolve. We've all been in scenarios where you need to make sure that the partner you choose buys into what you're trying to do and doesn't try and just sell you services. So we needed to make sure we had that. So lucky for Emperor, Keith was very just to take one step back, when we did these interviews with these agencies, they said, "Oh, how long have you got to do this?" And we said, "Well, 4 or 5 months." The Exco wanted to do us in 3 months, and I said that's just not possible. And Keith was the only agent. Keith was one of the only people in the agencies that actually said, "Yeah, we can do it," without any kind of sharp intake of breath. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of liked Emperor and the team there, because they were very pragmatic, very proactive. As Keith said, all through lockdown, we were having a silly number of meetings, but very proactive meetings during that period. They understood the business quite quickly. We'd done some previous work from a corporate reporting tender process point of view, so they kind of understood who we were. They engaged with over 100 staff, the Exco members, clients, and our communities. We then delivered in the next phase a brand for everybody. So it wasn't just the legacy business, i.e. the European business, telling the US guys or telling the Asian guys what we were doing from central committee level. It was actually for everybody. So talking to clients, German clients who are uber conservative, to talking to Japanese clients and Japanese staff, talking to people in Cape Town and in the US, and having this brand which was very vibrant and moving away from a brand that was very corporate and a very kind of safe, boring feel was very important. At the start of this presentation, we did say, I don't know if you saw it, but we did say there was this kind of ranking of 1 to 10, and 1 being very safe and something probably going backwards. Our current brand at the time was probably a 2 or 3, I think we agreed. And Emperor said, "Well, where do you want it to be on that scale?" And Martin said, "Well, shock me." So we were going for an 11. We were going for a 10, really. And then Emperor, over the course of this next period, delivered us brands that were ranging from a 5 to a 6 to an 11. And the brand that you see today is the 11 brand. Firstly, it's it's a blend. It uses blends. It's a dynamic brand. And so really in the delivering of these things, we had to deliver a number of different things, new IR portal, new corporate website, which really sells our people. It sells the fact that we're a service business. It sells the fact that people buy an intangible service and really they're buying our experience. We have to put all of that in one common value proposition. Next phase was really to sell that into staff, which we successfully did. We sold it into clients. We then, as part of the new brand, developed an employer brand, an employee value proposition, and a people promise. And then when it came to the deployment launch, a bit like Greencore, as Guy said, because COVID is, the negative side of COVID is we couldn't roll it out to everybody all at the same time, and budget restrictions and all that kind of stuff. So we deployed it in a digital phase first in time for the half year results, which was I think with the 9th of September. So that was a new website, new IR portal, new internal messaging, people promise, value proposition, literature, and all that kind of stuff. Anything digital. And then we are in the process now of phase 2 of deploying the global brand everywhere. Our London office is close to finishing. Some of the other offices that are accessible are available. And this slide really kind of sums up and brings it all together, who we are. So we're a leading global provider of alternative asset and corporate services. The fact that service is a very, very important part of what we do. It's one of the top 2 things. So, that's why it defines who we are and it empowers you as in the client. We stand for a wide range of other things which came out of the staff research and client research, but really the 3 kind of pillars are that we're professional, we're innovative in the way we go about things, processes, technology, everything else, and that we provide a quality service. That then kind of is structured by 2 kind of core things that have always been with us. And we're very important to bring out that, we don't lose clients. We build very long-term, or like to build long-term relationships with them. And so often clients around the world will come to us, and then we will go into new locations to help them grow. So that's a good example of our success in our Asia office, for example, because it's about their success and about the long-term relationships. Emperor helped us to change the tone of voice. So you imagine we're talking all about all these messages and pushing all these core messages into target media, into editorial, into keynote interviews, panel discussions, roundtables. But obviously we didn't have a kind of a core tone of voice. And so Emperor helped us with those kind of things. And I think that my favorite one is how we had all these core messages. I think we had this thing called the word twins, where all these core USPs, because someone says, what's your USP? Our elevator pitch is not simple. But how do we get staff to remember all of the core USPs that they want to say? And we came up with the brand name San, and actually how it's, I don't know if it's a mnemonic or an anagram, can't remember what it is, but effectively it makes up, so every one of our messages is either strategic, it communicates a partnership or an alliance, that we're nimble, and we kind of, even though we're sizable now in our industry, we're still quick-footed. We're niche. We're not everything to everybody. We're not a bank. We don't try and force structured products down people's throats. We are a very niche provider of bespoke solutions. So we have dedicated, tailored teams who are expert in a wide range of things, and we handpick the team to fit the client. And the fact that we're expert in what we do, so not many people can say that they have 200 people who all they focus on is real assets administration or corporate administration, as an example. And then putting it all together is the fact that we had a call to action, which is about talking, because that's a very important part of what we do. Next slide, please. So what do we do? This is the new brand. It is, we went through, this is the 11th or the one of the 11 brands we had. The first 6 had an ident associated with it, because a lot of people in our industry have idents, so we wanted to explore that, but we just ditched that ident. And we had that horrible sinking feeling the first 5 brands that we weren't going to get there. And then we kind of, Helen and the team at Emperor reshuffled their thoughts with, working collaboratively with us, and we came up with the next 6 brands. This was one of them. It is very important. There is a lot of kind of inner messages here. The S and the A in between has a symmetry and a partnership. That's to infer partnership. It's written in lowercase. It's a unique hand-drawn font. It's a very kind of softer feel compared to the previous logo we had, which is all capitalized and thinner. And the most important part is that I think is that the A and the E are the same, but just inverted on a different axis. And that you'll notice there's a dot. We call it a full point. And actually that's the start of a conversation, because our life's all about conversations and helping clients to, achieve their financial goals. Next slide, please. So we use the full point in everything we do. There's a horrible picture of me. And, we really are very proud of the brand. When we rolled it out internally, there wasn't one negative comment at all. And we presented it to every single person on obviously video calls, which is very difficult. In a normal scenario, we would have rolled it out, but this was right in the middle of lockdown when we rolled it out. Next slide, please. So we talked about service to finance empowers you. This is our value proposition. It is a very simple statement, and this is a good example of a word twin. So service is, and you'll see a lot of these in some of the next slides, but the first thing we say is whatever the area is. So it could be insight, it could be professionalism, it could be quality, innovation. This one's service, because service defines who we are and enables us to empower clients. Next one, please. So this is a good example of different aspects of things. So you'll see elements of our new website, optimized for mobile. What we share, we spend a lot of time sharing thought leadership, editorial, insight work. You'll see that it's a dynamic brand. We don't sit on one color. Our industry is very busy with blacks and blues and purples, very institutional colors. So we wanted to move away from that and also take it on board the fact that we need to be culturally aware of the nuances and the power that color has. So that's why we've embodied a lot of the previous brand palette colors, but also injected new blends into them. So this is a good example of different things that we have. And then next one. And then as we as part of so the brand was set, and then we kind of wanted, we're a people business, so we have to be attracting the best talent in the market to come and work for us. A lot of the people that I work with, my colleagues, are accountants or chartered secretaries or lawyers or experts in their qualified experts in their area. So 85% of all of the people at SAN are professionally qualified or training to be professionally qualified. That is a very important aspect of the business. So having the best people to come work for us is really important. So we wanted to have an employer brand which was very, very powerful. This is a good summary slide which sums up our employer brand. So so whilst the value proposition is service to finance empowers you, we want everybody to make sure that they make every day count, which is our people promise. And that is kind of pillared again, like the value proposition and the kind of the core brand, around 3 core pillars. So these are really our values or behaviors, or we used to have 6 different behaviors or values, which really were, if you looked up any company, you could probably see those words written on their pages. They didn't really mean anything. So with the team at Emperor, we developed these values. So we're professional, we're connected, we care every day. And this is a good example of how this has come to life on employer brand. So this is for our staff and also for our employment markets. So in the 20 locations in which we're located, that's also prime territory for getting new staff into the company. And you can see we've been deploying, you know, one of the aspects we've been given face masks to all our staff, which was a tough decision to make, because we didn't really want to recognize COVID as in a kind of any negative way. But obviously we have to be cognizant of any local laws and things like that. So it actually has gone down very well. Next slide, please. So the future, what does the future hold? Well, lucky Emperor, we were very aware that they were a corporate reporting business, and we wanted to make sure that we continue to evolve how our brand, our new global lovely brand, was deployed in things like annual report, which is a very good marketing, a very good piece of marketing literature. So Emperor are helping us with our next annual report, which is due out in April next year. And I'm delighted to say that we've already made fantastic progress on the front cover, which is often the most important part of the annual report, in my view. And there's other things that we're working with Emperor on because we realise that actually we've got this fantastic platform, and we really need to make sure that we're continuing to push it forward. So actually, just before I did nick Orange's tagline, which used to be "The future's bright, the future's orange," but in Sarn world, it's definitely purple, hot pink, and peach. Thanks.
No, thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Guy and Ruth, as well. I'm going to get you to questions virtually immediately. Look, there's a list of things here. I had seen the decks clearly before everybody else had today, so I could draft the major learnings from both of them. I think quickly running through this, is your narrative fit for purpose? If you can't identify the purpose of the business, because there is some purpose washing out there, actually seek it out properly and go find purpose. Don't force it, okay? It is part of your vision and your mission. I think it's very clear from both organisations, leadership had a major part to play. And I think as well, what you've got a clear sense is ownership from both of our speakers today as well, in terms of how they have owned this project from beginning to end. It's not a mission, it's not a vision or a purpose. It's all of those things, and it does run through your organisation. And it's going to take a little bit of time, but actually what you've also had is demonstration from both people about the effect really positively that it has on their business.